There was a time in my life when I thought I was going to die in Special Forces. See, I want adventure, I want action, but you can also be a smart guy and do these things. There was a point where I saw the burnout and the dissatisfaction because it wasn't truly being on the friggin' A team like I was. Here you are coming out of this, you're at that level, you're moving away from your peak state, but you have all this knowledge, know what it was like to be there. Now you're trying to fit it into a different mold. I think there's actually value in that. Having a cut point, no longer trying to live in your glory days, exploring new things. You have a very good reckoning and understanding of what flow state is. Man, I lived a superhuman feeling. How do we train flow state so that it generalizes to benefits across different categories? By operating at the edge of your capability and training, you would learn what that was. We would train to such high levels that it could make combat appear easy. You know, in the crisis situation, it's not like we default to the actions that we would desire, but we default to the level of our training.
I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious. How do you personally operationalize, either back then or now, getting the hell out of that?
If I can move the needle with certain techniques, it gives me 5% here, 10% there. But as I found out, rather than trying to default and go to all these techniques, you got to get the pillars down pat.
So many people are so many steps removed from what actually is reality.
You would use all these different techniques to ensure that you aren't using your own biases to come to the conclusion. You're always going to have your own biases. For the regular person out there, the biggest problem is the way they're consuming their information. It's not what to think, it's how to think.
Curt, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
The most important question of the day. Are aliens real?
Well, all you gotta do is look at our southern border.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so we'll keep it in that context. But no, I am not getting on that train. Yeah, sure.
So Curt actually worked at Area 51, right?
Oh, well, Area 51's where we do training. It's actually
I know.
It's not that big of a deal in the military, but everybody.
He just, before we were going to do this like weeks ago, and he's like, just fucking no aliens. And I was like, all right, man, no aliens.
But when we stop, then you tell us.
Dude. Well, unfortunately, I already did something. That's why he's kind of joking about it. It kind of blew up on Twitter.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, some people like, this guy worked for the UAP task force, and he says there's no aliens in there. Yeah, not fun. Yeah.
So there's really aliens?
Brother, you do you. I can only go with what I've experienced.
Curt's also going to enjoy me asking you about flat Earth.
Yeah, it's kind of like where the conversations start going after a while.
Yeah. When I describe you to my friends or to my colleagues, I'm like, Curt he's the real life Jason Bourne. I'm like, he's done shit that I'm sure you've forgotten more things than you share and most people ever experience in their life. And creating context for the audience today is absolutely impossible to do you justice, right? Mm-hmm. And I think going through your history is a useful place to start, because I think understanding where you've come from, what you've been through, what you understand, what you've seen in this world allows us to start to understand how you view the world. And the greatest gift you provided me in my life and continue to provide me in my life is, other than your friendship, your being a reliable man in my life, you also just allow me to see the world differently through a different lens, and see behind the curtain, so to speak, of like, we're all so manipulated. You said something to me once that was like, even if you know you're being manipulated, you're being manipulated.
Absolutely.
So you have to stop watching. And I was like, oh. And there's so many things you've said to me along our probably 10 years knowing each other now that just like still sit in my brain, that still resonate, that you wouldn't even know, but they still affect me every day, man, which is why I value your friendship so much. And I'm really excited to welcome you on the show, welcome you on the podcast, to sort of reveal your wisdom and brilliance to the world, because I think you're a gift to everyone that you meet. And, not to blow smoke up your butt to start the podcast, but I'm really excited to dig in. I think for value for the audience, like you bypassed military acceptance, or had to get like special acceptance to like bypass the age requirement, because you went in at 17 instead of 18.
Yeah.
What? Tell me what happened there. Why were you so pulled to be in the military at 17?
That's okay. So initially, I was doing real well in school. Set up to graduate high school early and all that. And they actually signed the papers at 16, but I was not allowed to go in until 17.
Your parents signed the papers?
Yeah, because that was the contentious point. Everybody thought I was going to college to be a scientist. And dude, I loved science. I was a ninth grader in courses with 12th graders, physics, organic chemistry, the whole gamut. Just really enjoyed it. And I thought that was going to be my shtick. And I don't know if I told you this story, but, and I'm not sure if it's the same in chem. In high school, you have your classes and you have these things called study hall. It's basically a free hour that you're supposed to be doing homework or whatever. And my study hall was as a library assistant, total nerd job, even though I was a hellion. And I'm in there, and our librarian was this young guy, 38 at the time, old to me, but 38 years old, blonde hair, tan, very fit, weird sense of humor. All the other teachers hated him. And even though at the same time you could tell all the female teachers really liked him.
Right.
And I'm back there one day, and he's got some stuff out, and I open up this photo album, and it's him, and he's in all these other countries, and like they're action photos. He's doing some crazy, I'm like, Mr. Brooks, what is it? And he started explaining to me his life from where in the 60s he was a paratrooper, did these things, then got out and went in the French Foreign Legion, just up and went. And if you know anything about the French Foreign Legion, that's a commitment. You don't just go there and decide you're getting out, they'll come after your ass, you know what I mean? So he's in the French Foreign Legion and mainly starting to fight in some of the French's colonial Bush War actions in Africa. That's where most of his photos were. He spoke, at that time, at least 3 different languages, just a well-rounded, educated, but at the same time, could brawl.
Badass.
Yeah, I'm like, this is so cool. And immediately science is like fading, and I'm like, I want adventure, I want action. And it sounds like, you can also be a smart guy and do these things. 'Cause before I'd never considered the military. And he goes, well, if you want to do this and, not only have the adventure, but also be intelligent and actually apply your intelligence, Special Forces, the Green Berets, no question about it. And Bud started doing all my research like a kid will do. And that was, told my parents, I'm going, I said, I had to assuage the whole family. I said, at some point I will get my college degree. And I did later on, but that's all they were about, And I said, you can either sign now or I'll just wait until and I will do it, but I'm doing this. And so they signed it, and I was off on my trajectory.
How did going to the military at 17 land? Were you in there with like a bunch of 18 or 19-year-old kids, or were you with like all the way up to...
Primarily, when you're in basic training, starting out in the infantry, yeah, it's a bunch of youngsters like you. Primarily, mostly recent high school graduates, so 18. And, then you have the occasional 23-year-old who's like this old dude.
He's the OG.
Yeah, man. It's so funny when you look at your perspectives. Yeah. And I remember those guys because it's really interesting that... First of all, they're getting dogged and are just as miserable as everyone else. But, when you had time to talk to them, oh, he was a mechanic for 2 years. They had some life experience behind them as well. So you got a little perspective. And that continued on. I'd meet guys who had life experience. Matter of fact, I can honestly say that most of my friends throughout that period of time were at least 10 to 20 years older than me. That's the kind of guys I tend to hang around with.
So you went into basic training in the Army.
Yep.
Trained through that for how long?
That's, I think, maybe 20 weeks or so. The initial period, you go into your infantry training, you got to go to airborne school, jumping out of planes, all that jazz. And then I went to my first unit after that, which was at Fort Bragg.
What'd you do there?
I was an infantryman in the 82nd Airborne Division. So basically paratroopers. Just think about the guys who you see in like the Band of Brothers, like that, just straight up grunts, nothing sexy, nothing special, just basic infantryman. And I did that for right about 3 years, and then I went Special Forces after that.
Green Beret?
Yep.
I know nothing about Green Beret, and I suspect the audience wouldn't either. But so what would be the difference between a Green Beret and the other Special Forces units? Okay,
and just so you know, there's tons of info out there on YouTube. Like, it's the question, like, what are the differences between these guys? Who's better? All that good jazz. But so most common comparison you'll see is Green Berets and SEALs. What's the difference? Really what you can look at is the mission sets. SEALs obviously are going to have a maritime, ocean type of, or ocean or riverine, as we would call it, the waterways. That's their dominant territory, even though they do tons of stuff as evidenced in the past 20 years on land. But that's kind of their forte. So if something's going to happen on an oil rig, they're going to receive priority in doing that type of mission. Whereas the Green Berets, a lot of people don't realize it because much like the SEALs, they were doing a lot of missions that weren't in their primary scope during this past 20 years. But their primary mission is what's called unconventional warfare. And unconventional warfare is something born primarily of the whole Cold War, when you had what was called the domino theory. It's where the Soviets were backing like Vietnam, Cambodia, and then in our hemisphere, Nicaragua, these trying to set up communist regimes in these countries. And the idea was if one fell, it was only a matter of time before others fell. So our primary mission was to go into those countries and set up resistance movements, insurgents, guerrillas. So unconventional warfare was our bread and butter. And whenever something like that wasn't going on, we would go to friendly partner nations. I spent a lot of time going and doing something called foreign internal defense. So let's say Honduras, a country down in Central America, we would go down and actually train their units to be professionalized like us. We train them in skills, and of course, that came with money and equipment. So the unit we're training might have all new rifles. We have ammunition for them. So we're basically equipping them. It's called actually train, equip, and man. That's what we do. It's basically setting up the infrastructure of the military. The concept behind this is that if you can have these other militaries doing the job, we shouldn't be sending our guys to fight. Granted, that doesn't work out in many cases, but the great thing about that is it also helped with our mission of unconventional warfare, because there was no difference in going and training these guys than the fact that in an unconventional warfare scenario, you're parachuting into a country, linking up with the guerrillas and doing the exact same thing, teaching them how to shoot, how to move, how to communicate, and all that good jazz. So that was a big mission. And then I had other more specialized missions, primarily in the counterterrorism role, which is basically manhunting.
Feels like going in there and training these guys and arming them isn't always going to go according to plan. Is there some situations where it's kind of backfiring?
Later on down the road, it has. But this is stuff you could have never predicted. For example, and it's out in the various media now, where we had trained some of the Mexican units.
Of course.
And then because the U.S. can be a fickle uncle, all of a sudden you withdraw that support, kind of like, going into a country, helping someone, then kind of turning your backs on them, basically. Sure, at least that's what it seems to them. Yeah. And so when the support for some of these specialized units we're training disappears, the U.S. has already got its eye on the next shiny object. These guys are there with hat in hand. Is my government going to support me, pay me? Well, no, but you know what? Cartels, they would love your expertise. So that certainly happened in that situation. And to a lesser extent in Venezuela, it's happened. I believe in Guatemala, there's special force units called the Caibil. Some of them went over to the narco traffickers. So there's that type of thing. That's beyond your control. When you're training these guys, you're 100% trying to equip them for whatever the mission is. I'd say that was just the biggest piece. But in terms of backfiring, there's little funny things that can happen, sure. Cultural things, because so being in Latin America, I had to ensure I spoke fluent Spanish. So I was a very good Spanish speaker, and you're teaching these guys in their language. And what's so funny is, while Spanish is one language, it has different, just like in the States, different words will mean dialects, different things. Yeah, like we call them modismos, it's just basically your idiosyncrasies. And so, in one country, like the verb coger means to get, okay? Like, get me that pencil. Coger me a piece, something along those lines. Whereas in another country, coger means to get after it. Got it. All right. And so one of my buddies is talking to a young, basically their version of a private, coger el coronel. He's like, get me the colonel. And, this guy's all of a sudden like looking super nervous. He's like, coger el coronel. And this guy's like thinking, fuck the colonel. We can cuss on this guy? Are we good? Okay, I'm sorry about that. But anyway, little things like, and brother, so many examples of those things over the years. Mm-hmm. Words that would mean guest house in one country mean a prostitution place in others, just, and those are always fun. So you pick those up along the way. That's awesome. Yeah.
Great. So how long were you in the Green Berets?
20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Before you went to Delta Force?
No, Delta was like actually towards the beginning.
Okay.
Right. As a matter of fact, rarely speak about this, but I was one of the first guys to be brought off the street. So I did the infantry thing, and at that time it was probably just due to me being young and not knowing how to do it. The type of paperwork and things you had to do to get in special forces seemed to be like a very long, multi-year road. A guy told me about the existence of Reserve and National Guard Special Forces units, which I had no idea. And it was actually quicker for me to get out of the military, go join the Special Forces Reserves, get a Class 8 for Special Forces, and go through the course. And then I went on active duty afterwards. But what happened during that period is I was recruited and brought on active duty by Delta Force. I believe I'm the first guy they ever did that with, because later on that did become a thing where they opened up selection to the National Guard and others so they could come try out. So that they expanded their pool because, the attrition rate is already so high. To include even opening it to other services. And it was an experiment. The way they brought me in, the way they did the administrative paperwork to make it look like I was just going to a regular place and all that good stuff. So it was a really, really cool piece of history coming in like that.
Yeah, I remember you speaking about one of the things I'm really fascinated about is the mental game of the mental fortitude, the mental torment, I suspect, when it comes to like these Green Beret or these Delta Force testing weeks or
their selection process.
Selection processes.
Yeah, BUDS and both the Special Forces course at one time. Not only were they your training course to get in other words, I call them the ticket for entry, because that's just when it's all starting, even though most people concentrate on BUDS and selection, thinking, oh my God, that stuff's tough. It's like, hey dude, that's just the price for admission. Then you go to the real work when you get to the teams. But with both BUDS and, I'll say at one time, the Special Forces course, selection was wrapped up within the course structure. So you did have some of the, like, what people would consider the hazing type stuff or the rough stuff going on, as you're also having to learn your skills going through. And that's the way people were weeded out. Later on, Special Forces added Special Forces assessment and selection to kind of cut that out so they could truly concentrate on the best way to have a guy pass the course. Because when you're getting some of that other stuff going on while you're going, you might be in one of the hard areas like the Special Forces medic course, but yet if you're getting smoked, all sorts of hours and night things, you might not be getting the most bang for the buck on concentrating on the academic or practical material. So they're like, let's use all these parameters from what we learned, run this selection course. So when the guys are in the course, it's truly concentration on being the best they can at whatever the job is we're training them in.
Such an expensive investment, isn't it? Like so much time and energy into something you certainly wouldn't want to.
And that's exactly it. That's one of the things they looked at really is, look at our attrition rates. We're never going to even be able to fully man our teams. And so by being able to run the selections allowed us to better, it was a really good idea.
The number of skills that you've explained to me you guys are responsible for upkeeping over life is unbelievable. It's remarkable. And so it sounds like you're doing some type of intense physical, some type of intense mental, and certainly some skill acquisition every day throughout probably the duration of time. Yeah. And one of the useful things that I extracted was, when you and I spoke about this when we first met each other, it was like, you don't have to do all things to the highest level. You just have to do them to the minimum standard. Like, what's the least amount of frequency I need to participate in this to maintain the standard of performance?
Yes.
That's really useful in life.
It's like, super useful, dude.
Yeah.
So I've taken that and translated in, my own work with people, if it applies, if they're the type of person who has these things that they have to do. By the way, to include regular things like things they do with their children, it's like the prioritization. So what we're talking about right now in the military is called the METL, METL, Mission Essential Task List. So you're in this organization, let's just say it's, for example, I was in the Sink and Extremist Force. The primary mission was counterterrorism hostage rescue. So whenever there's hostage rescue, your level of shooting has to be much higher than that of any other organization out there, which is one of the reasons why Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 have that level of shooting that they're known for. And it was the same type of thing in the SIF, and we had this Mission Essential Task List. And so for being able to enter a room, distinguish between targets, who's the bad guy, shoot them, and not shoot the person who's there you're supposed to be rescuing, took a high degree of skill. So obviously in that Mission Essential Task List, shooting at a particular standard was high on it.
Under huge amounts of duress.
Exactly. So shooting was usually a minimum of 3 times a week, what you were doing, and often it was all week long, along with all the other skills you were working with. And then there are things like military free-fall parachuting, okay, which by our standard you had to be able to do with what's called full combat equipment. That means your rucksack, your weapon, all that good stuff, as well as oxygen, which is completely different from skydiving. When you're 12,000 feet down, you don't have to wear oxygen. It's a lot easier, even with the combat equipment on. But then when you're shooting north of 18,000 feet, 20,000 feet and higher, you got to wear oxygen. let's just say this, it takes the fun out of skydiving, all right? The military knows how to take fun out of shit. So you're up there and you're doing this, and perhaps it's a hey-ho jump, so that's where you're standing off, opening high, and then gliding into a place. That requires a pretty good modicum of skill, but since you've trained intensely in it, you don't have to do that all week like you do with the shooting.
Right.
Because first of all, the probability of inserting on a mission and doing that type of thing was really, really low, but you still had to have the skill. So in our case, that piece of the task is spread out over 3 months. So every quarter, you had to do an O2 jump, O2 night jump with equipment, and you had a series of jumps you had to do, very few. So you touched the skill, you maintained proficiency in it, but you weren't going overboard and trying to do it like you're shooting. And there are a lot of other subsets of skills. Back in that time era, really old days for communications, we used Morse code. So tapping a lead key, sending your stuff out. So you had a certain level of code speed you had to do. So you just had to touch that skill enough to maintain that code speed. And this applied to all sorts of things. You mentioned the physical aspect. I'll show you sometimes, as a matter of fact, because I have a really good Excel sheet, and it was designed to show where you were at in it in terms of physical skills you had to do just to be considered functional. And what was really cool about it is passing is what most people would consider excelling. So just to pass the test, you're excelling. And then anything above that was gravy. But what we knew is at least if a guy could do these types of things at this level, that probably not going to be any problems anywhere else. It was, you're familiar with the term general physical preparedness.
Yeah, of course.
We call it operational readiness. But regardless of the term, it was the idea that at that time there were beepers. Now we got cell phones, but the beeper would go off, and you didn't know if you were going to the mountains, I'm talking about high altitude mountains,
Sure.
perhaps in the Andes or something like that, or you were going to be in a jungle, the desert. But because you had this, your ability to adapt to situations would be much quicker than someone who was very stovepiped into some type of skill.
Yeah, it seems like the ultimate desire, or for me anyways, like the ultimate level of preparedness. Like I'm always ready for all things in every direction, which, sounds like it's probably impossible to sustain over the duration of your life, but during that phase of life was, requirements.
Yeah, and then of course, because you're not inflexible, if you're because you're on call for certain periods of time for the missions to the exclusion of everything else during that period of time, if you notice a certain area of the world was heating up, you could skew your training also. Okay, probability means here, so not just your type of shooting, explosives work you were doing and things of that nature, but even your language. Okay, this is going to be Brazil, so got to work on my Portuguese. Things like that. You could skew the training towards a higher probability of an event happening as well. But the GPP type concept was always the baseline, and that's something I've carried with me now because at this phase of life, I'm not competing in anything. There's no requirement job-wise to do it. And I've come to find that GPP concept, that operational readiness, ready for anything kind of attitude, is exactly because I don't have anything I'm striving towards. It's like, okay, so how can I be the best at just being this well-rounded individual?
Is it hard to participate now in life without having those specific missions, knowing they're always on the horizon? Like, is it hard to keep your readiness? Is it hard to keep the regimen, keep the discipline?
Yeah.
Or is it just built into the DNA by now?
It's building the DNA, but I would say only in certain domains. Like in the physical domain, that was the real challenge for me because I really liked having that reason to do it. And I will say it faded for a while, and I got into obstacle course racing for a while, like Spartan and Tough Mudder. So that was kind of and plus those kind of fit the GPP role.
Yep.
And so those worked well, but I lost interest in doing those and the frequency that they were offered, at least here locally, or maybe twice, 3 times a year, even though I could have used that as something to train towards. So now it's gone more towards something like, so as you know my kids very well, I've got 3 15-year-olds, and my GPP is more oriented to being superior to them
Kicking their
in
ass.
every way, yes. So I turn 60 next year, they're 15, and we haven't mentioned it yet. I just was in a very bad accident about 6 weeks ago, so I'm about 30 pounds lighter than normal. But the way I look at it is now I've cut off all the fluff, so it's the substrate to build back better, and still crush them. So yeah.
Man, I think, it's a beautiful opportunity for you to see, when that happened, it actually motivated me. I was like, be prepared, right?
Yeah.
Like, build margin into the system.
Yes.
Yeah. We can choose to talk about that or not. What was the hardest thing you ever did in Special Forces?
Physically,
I don't know. It's an open-ended question.
God, that is because
was it mentally hard for you? Was it physically hard for you?
no, man,
was it emotionally hard for you?
I loved it, dude.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you right now. I thought I was gonna die. When I retired, and so I was 41, 42 at the time. I'm like, oh shit, I'm still alive.
Right.
Because there was a time in my life when I thought I was going to die in Special Forces. I mean, I thought that's what I was going to do, and it was going to be.
And you made peace with that?
Oh, yeah. That was kind of a common thing, I would say.
Yeah, I suspect that would be one of the hardest things for anyone leaving that level of performance. It's just like pro athletes, right? Actually, it's interesting. One of the most common messages I get is from retired pro athletes. I say, how the hell did you shift out of what I was doing to being, an entrepreneur and whatever? But I don't think anything. What I did was anything compared to what you did. I mean, it was all that I did. It was all of my life at the time when I was competing. But you were in such an elite group, such an elite mindset, such an elite community, reintegrating back into modern society, modern culture. To me, seems like it would be a struggle.
Absolutely, and I would say just with what you did coming out of the bodybuilding world and at the level you were competing, the parallels are actually quite strong. So I know you say, there's a
freaks of nature.
Difference. Exactly. It's like you are, bottom line is, can sound arrogant or whatever, but the truth was, it was a feeling of being superhuman. I mean, like my kids, when they look at all this stuff, they're like, you're basically an Avenger.
Yeah, totally.
Like
Jason Bourne.
Exactly. One of the guys who didn't have superpowers but was doing it. And it was like that for all the guys. So, here you are coming out of this, you're at that level, and you're moving away from your peak state, but yet you have all this knowledge, know what it was like to be there, and now you're trying to fit it into a different mold. And so for me, what happened with me and happened with many other guys is that we tend to go in a very similar type of work post-period. So for me, I went and worked for an intelligence agency. I did a little bit of contracting for a while, but all in the same domain type of work. So there's a comfort zone aspect of it. Retrospectively, while all that experience was great, I would have liked to have perhaps done something completely different. And so there are some guys who get out and say, I don't want to do anything like this, and they go off somewhere else and entrepreneurism, and they make it work in another way. And I think there's actually value in that, in having a cut point, no longer trying to live in your glory days in some half-assed manner, and exploring new things. So, but I did it by going into light type work, and there was a point where I saw the burnout and the dissatisfaction because it wasn't truly being on the friggin' A team like I was with SF. Right. It was being with a smattering of people who were like that. So, you had some of the camaraderie, but for the most part, very poor substitute, and wouldn't recommend it. The other thing that was hard was when I made the transition from being a senior non-commissioned officer, so a sergeant first class, to being a warrant officer. So it was basically like truly changing my status to where I was one of the guys on the team to then being a commander or assistant commander on a team. So you have to, these are guys you've been with.
Commander's like, you're not on the field anymore, you're in the office.
No, in the field. As a matter of fact, that's why I did it. So there was a point in time, I don't know if this is still true, once you made Master Sergeant, you might get 3 years of team time. So when I say team time, I'm talking about the A team. That's where the action happens. Yep. And a lot of guys live to stay there. I was one of those guys. So I had E8 coming up on the horizon, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I could do 3 years team sergeant. That would be real cool. But then I saw all these guys going off to be in basically administrative positions, filling important roles, but at the end of the day, not what I was after. Right. Staying in the fight was all I cared about. And I knew if I went warrant, I was guaranteed at least another 5 years on a team. So I went warrant, and I ended up coming back to a team, it was less than 2 years after going warrant. That was actually my old team, the sniper team I was on as a sergeant. A lot of the same guys there. And so I had to fulfill a role in a different dynamic. So even though they're buddies, and we probably did some very shady stuff as sergeants, now I had to be like a little bit more reserved, a little bit more the responsible
So
guy.
explain to me the difference between
Yeah.
sergeant and warrant, because I don't know.
Okay, NCOs are what we call the backbone of the Army. They're what make things happen. They do the real work, so to speak. Whereas officers, they're the leadership. They guide policy, the direction. They get the mission from on high, see what the strategy is overall, and then they relay that information and it turns into action with the NCOs. So I was in this leadership role, even though it was a small 12-man unit in this leadership role. So I know what the mission from on high is and where I'm taking us in this direction and guiding it, whereas the NCOs are making it happen. Whereas before I was one of those guys making it happen. And by the way, I was very competent and very experienced. So I had to tread a very fine line because my counterpart was the senior sergeant on the team, the master sergeant who was the team sergeant, which is what I've been if I'd stayed. And sometimes I had quite a bit more experience than that guy. Sometimes we might be on par, but my line, so there could be a lot of, because I'm kind of getting into his knickers about how things should be done. I had to really practice, empower them to do things their way and get us to this end state that I have laid out. Yeah, it's
so it's more like being the boss rather than being the soldier.
It is, so it was an adjustment. Like I said, that's one of the things about being a warrant officer is because the good warrants you had typically been NCOs, sergeants for a long time on a team, so a lot of experience, a lot of skills. So that way, you already knew what everybody else was. When I was occupying the position as a warrant, I already knew what everybody's job was.
Because you done.
In some cases, much better than them because they had only been at it for maybe 5 or 6 years. That made it great because I knew how to resource them. I knew what kind of challenges they were probably facing, and obviously could mentor and, like I said, empower them. That was the word. Empower them to do what they needed to do. But I wasn't doing it anymore. I wasn't the doer. I wasn't the first guy in the door taking the shot. As a matter of fact, on our reconnaissance missions, I was on a sniper team. I'm sending out my guys to do sniper work, and I'm sitting back in this thing called the Tactical Intelligence Center, receiving information from them, directing things, because I'm the officer. I'm not supposed to be out there doing it.
Right.
Every now and then I get out there because, you got to get out there every now and then. But for the most part, that was my role.
Was that hard?
Oh, yeah. You want to be out there in the shit. Yeah.
What are the most memorable missions you guys had in, maybe as a sergeant, maybe as a officer?
Most memorable? There are really a lot of them. And there are missions that are both combat type missions, and there are missions that weren't combat where you were doing things like under that FID moniker.
What's that?
The Foreign Internal Defense, where you're going and training these people. There was a lot of good stuff there because sometimes you were doing FID only to return to that place because of the situation changing and it being combat. So you actually had relationships with these people in that country, and that was really great. I remember when Venezuela first popped, and Chavez took over, the socialist commie guy, and we built such good rapport. There were guys from his military, like calling our team rooms directly, like, how can I help? We'd have to put them in touch with someone. But that was the cool thing about Special Forces. By working with these people so closely, something bad's going on in their country, they were willing to contact us directly. So that was valuable. There were cases, this happens, so it's not like I'm revealing anything secret here, but it's just a cool example. There was a case where back in the 80s, we were training a guy. He was a second lieutenant in this nation's army. Well, he ends up becoming their Minister of Interior later on in life. But because of the relationship we had built with him from that young age and then through the years of being trained, he ended up, let's just say, becoming very friendly to our interests while he was there and becoming a great asset. And, that type of thing happens. So there's the...
Wasn't that Osama bin Laden as well? Didn't he do the same thing?
I was not involved in that. That was more of a fifth group area of operations thing. But yeah, the start of the Mujahideen was because my enemy is my friend back when they were fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan, and the U.S. was, once again, equipping, training, and, helping them with that. And that's kind of like you mentioned, like something that didn't go right. That's one of those cases where you don't know 10, 20, 30 years down the road, people you were once in there tight with, it, flips around and turns into something ugly, which in that area of the world can happen much more easier than others. Because they're Muslim and because their fealty is going to be in a certain area, and because of the radicalization that can happen. Not all these guys were that radical back at that time period.
Are you saying that just because Muslim is radical? Or what?
No, because that was that was where it went. Like in Latin America, you're not going to have that degree of extremism occur. I mean, we had communists back in primarily the 80s and early 90s dealing with that, but a lot of those people, when all that was over and the Soviet Union fell, and a lot of those people ended up, in other words, it wasn't their life, it wasn't their calling. Whereas you have a jihadist who maybe started back in the 80s with the Mujahideen and then goes through the Soviets, goes on then, leading to the events of 2001 on 9/11, they aren't changing. If anything, they get more radicalized and more focused on what it is they're trying to do.
What are they trying to do?
Well, in their case, you look at what they stated they were trying to do is because the U.S. was over in these areas of the world. They wanted us out of it. That was their.
So they wanted to kill the Americans.
We were at war with them. So, and you'll hear different groups. Most of them, and I'm going to not make any Islamist experts out of it, but for the most part, it's establishing a caliphate. As part of their religion, they believe, they're going to establish this dominant entity in the world that rules. Sharia law will be under that entity, and Islam will be the.
So it sounds religion. Just like another Aryan race. They believe they're the equivalent of what Hitler was saying.
Kind of. Except for it's not race oriented; it's religion. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can be a white, blue-eyed guy. It doesn't matter. All comers taken. So.
Yeah, I'm so ignorant when it comes to everything that happened in the Middle East, and looking back on it. It's so great to have you as a resource, and obviously, just to be like, what was actually going on over there. So what we hear, here in the West, you're like, our source of news, what was happening there is the media, and you're like, well, that's what the media wants you to see. Obviously, I know that now, but looking back 25 years ago, I'm like, I would have had no idea, just like everyone else sitting behind their television going, what's actually happening in the Middle East? And now it's driven by specific things, where back then you don't know that. You just figure it's like bad people versus good people, which is somewhat the case, and certainly somewhat not the case.
It's way oversimplistic now.
Of course.
It's just, it's not like that at all. But there are people, bad or good is going to be almost a useless moniker.
Of course.
But what it is they are certainly not doing anything in your best interest. That's what you need to know. Because, of course, on their side of it, they think they're the good guys. So I kind of dispel those pieces and figure out.
Yeah, I spent some time in the Middle East, and they're really great people. At least the ones that I met, they're wonderful people. Mothers and husbands and daughters and sons, and you're like, where does this all get construed as the propaganda that the U.S. and Canada saw? Yeah, I don't know what's real. I certainly still don't know what's real.
So by having, this is what's important in that comment you just made, is by having traveled, you saw a different perspective.
Yeah.
That's why, a lot of people you'll hear, they recommend travel so much, just so you get a taste of the flavors of things that are out there through a different lens. And that can also include, political, economic lens. Even though you're with people and perhaps you're there for a muscle camp, you're still getting to know them as people without all the hoopla. You may find out that if the conversation goes there, you might both be on the completely opposite sides of the day. But as people, it's all good. And trying to stay and remember that as people, we're still far more alike than we're different. And the cultural aspects, especially over there, tend to drive. Like other people, even in the U.S., I call them, they'll say they're Christian. I'm like, well, and I look at their behaviors and everything. It's like, you're a cultural Christian. Just like over in that area of the world, there were cultural Muslims. In other words, they grew up that way. That was the thing in their home. And it's what they identify with, but they're actually not really read into it or vested in it at all. It's just a default mechanism. So when you go and you meet these guys that are over in the Mideast, and that's a broad category, by the way. We're saying Mideast, Southwest Asia. We're talking about a big part of the world, to include Indonesia, even very heavily, Islam population. So it's not so much geographic. But the thing is you'll have those who are cultural Arabs. As a matter of fact, we'd have these guys who are towing the line while they're there. Then as soon as they get on the plane to come train with us in the U.S., they're like wanting to go to the strip club, drink booze, and all that. That's a cultural thing. It's not vested. And then, the guys we were fighting, a lot of those, you would actually encounter people who had bruises on their forehead because of the amount of praying they're doing and things like that. So cultural. And then you have the extremists, and those are the ones who've bought everything in the story and are usually under the influence of some psychopath and, trying to execute whatever their plan is.
Yeah, that kind of brings up my next question is like, what is your mindset as an operator going into a mission over there? Like, I'm sure that was varying based on the time frame and the mission, but I'm very curious what that needs to look like from a mindset going in to accomplish a mission.
That's something that evolved, obviously, by doing the work over time. And for me, it was just this, every now and then I would step back and kind of the teenage Curt would come to the forefront and be like, this is so fucking cool, that I get to do this. But for the most part, it was just a mindset of extreme professionalism. A lot of people will see things, they'll see guys on the tailgate of an airplane, jumping out into the night sky and things like that nature. At that point in time when I was doing those things, it was literally so much of a checklist. Okay, this done, right, got on target, and it was just no nonsense. There was no adrenaline rush. I mean, that was one of the interesting things as I started training other people later on, especially in, let's just say the mission was to go in and do a hostage rescue or some type of hit on a structure, to take out a particular person or capture them. And what I would see, whether I was training some of the SWAT teams or even civilians in what we call close quarter combat, that's where you're all flowing into the house and discriminatory shooting of targets and all that good jazz. They would always be amped up as if they thought there's a stack. You're on the outside door, there's a guy right there at the front, and there's like 3 or 4 guys stacked up behind him, and you see guys that are like, yeah, I'm ready to get in and get some and all that good stuff. Whereas if you looked at some guys in Delta Force or in the Special Forces SIF, it's just another Tuesday, man. Your breathing is there. You're ready to go in. Doesn't mean you don't have any of that perhaps initial anxiety about what's going to happen, but that immediately, that's just like we just used to do this. Literally, it's like the switch is on, and it's all professional. It's all doing what you've trained to do at such a high level. That's one of the things that you tend to miss later on, because it truly is a superhuman feeling, and it gets into what we've talked about in the past, flow state. You have a very good reckoning and understanding of what flow state is, even better than many of these pundits in the space explain it. It's like, man, I lived, because flow state usually a short duration. Like think Michael Jordan with his basketball, boom, he's there, flow, the shot's done, then he's back.
Down, bang.
Whereas in this, you're going through this whole thing, it's there, and I didn't know anything about that particular terminology at the time. But then let's just say you were doing it in training. And just like we would train to such high levels that it could make combat appear easy.
Right.
That's really what it was about. And so you'd come out of a structure after doing something, and we'd have what we called the story. And everybody goes through explaining what they're doing. You're talking about how you came in, cleared this corner, guy with the rifle over there, you engaged him with 3 rounds to the chest, moved over. This guy had no weapon, you're putting him down, getting flex, cuff on, moving, and you're just doing all, and you're talking about it. And as you talk about it, and then each guy talks about what his actions were, it takes several minutes. But usually we would have video on it, and it was always timed. What we all just described might have taken place in under 10 seconds.
Right.
And it's all this stuff. And to an outside observer, it just looks like a windmill, hurricane kind of thing going on. But no, it's all very precise. Guys are operating right at the edge of their capability. And by the way, by operating at the edge of your capability and training, you would learn what that was. So if I had shot that guy 3 times in the chest, but let's just say, lo and behold, 2 shots hit here, and then 1 went off into the wide of the target, okay,
you would
Curt,
know.
dial it, what's going on here? Because that was a no-go. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that gets you kicked off a team. Because that stray round might be going into another teammate.
Sure.
Or into a hostage in the wall behind him through the other room. So very accountable for every single bullet fired. And but like I said, really the cool thing about it was, and remember, there was a flow state, and so much of our job encompassed that, just like the jumping out of an airplane. Have you ever had a chance to do a tandem or anything like that yet? So what you'll find, what you'll hear from others, or even if you watch their videos, is they're going out of the aircraft and it's like, all this wind and stuff, and then they're there, and you talk to someone who's doing it their first time, it's almost like everyone, they really don't know what they saw. They're thankful they have a video of it because it was just an overwhelming. Whereas once you've done it 1,000+ times, you're going out and literally, man, it's almost like yawn. It's slow motion. You can tell everything that's going on, even though you're zipping along, at 120 plus miles an hour by the time you hit terminal. So if it's just a regular training jump, it's actually very enjoyable, because for most people it's like down fast, it's over, and they want to do it again. Whereas, for me, I was like, okay, I'll turn my pinky this way, see if I can shift. You just had all the time in the world by comparison because of, as we know, time dilation that occurs in flow state. So we had so many opportunities in our training to experience flow state, but in different domains. Because in a lot of the studies on flow state, one of the things that are the challenges, how do we train flow state so that it generalizes to benefits across different categories? And a lot of times it doesn't. So we were very fortunate that we did experience across a lot of different areas of skill.
Yeah, one of the things that don't want to gloss over is, like, you're going into this highly stressful situation with a peak amount of arousal, your adrenaline's flowing, your heart rate's generally wanting to be elevated, but you've trained through it so much, you're like, boom, I know how to turn it right down. I think that was one of the first things you and I connected over, was like understanding arousal control, understanding HRV, psychophysiology of like what's actually happening in that state. How do we train that? I think of like a UFC fighter training in a boxing ring and then walking out and fighting in front of 50,000 people. Like, that's a different game, right? Completely different game. So fascinating to think about. I'd like to sort of transition, even though we could talk about that forever. I don't want to keep you here all day, to like the things you and I first bonded about was how you've taken all these incredible lessons that you've learned in Green Beret, Delta Force, CIA, which obviously we didn't talk about, and how much you want to talk about that, and taken that and applied it to coaching, applied it to your own dynamic day-to-day, like performing well, recovering well, living long, unwinding all of the, I don't want to say it was trauma, but unwinding all of the experiences that still live in your nervous system and turning that into a high-functioning man now. That's where your value exceeds most humans I've ever met, right? You have so much value to provide for anyone because you've taken something that's done at the highest level in every different domain. And now you're like, hey, here's how to operationalize that to make your life more effective. And that's sort of, I think, where you and I connected, is like, I'd love to learn more about this. Teach me more. So foundational principle, most people living in a state of some version of stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. What is you start coaching me today. I'm like, hey, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious. How do you personally operationalize, either back then or now, getting the hell out of that?
Okay. Well, back then I didn't have the advantage of something we have now, which is being able to get metrics.
Yeah, measure.
Did not have that. I mean, at the most you could know by your breath rate, whether you were starting to hyperventilate or something was going awry there, or your pulse rate. And that was really about it. And then maybe perhaps if there's any weird self-dialogue going on that starts to skew negative or counterproductive. That was really it. And this was probably due to just being young. And like I said, this inculcation of being such a professional. As a matter of fact, I'm from a young kid. One of my favorite characters was Spock, because Spock was all about logic.
Totally.
And this emotional stuff had no. Now, granted, this does not bode well for some other developmental things in your life.
Like relationships.
Yeah, like compassion and there's a lot there I had to unwind. Yeah. But the bottom line is that's where I was at with it. So there was a lot of compartmentalization, which is not uncommon in that profession. Now it worked. For the period of time that I was there, it worked. Coming out of that phase of life, though, the wheels start coming off. And because we, first of all, started getting into the human performance aspect of things, start doing the coaching.
So you're about 40, 41 when you got it?
Yeah. So at that point in time, I'm still in great physical shape, with the exception of a lot of my injuries were starting to come home to roost. But for the most part, I was actually competing in the obstacle course racing at that time. And starting to take the metrics and doing things, realized that even when I thought I was zen, in a good meditative state, the friggin' engine, it was like somebody was sitting in their car and had the pedals on the floor,
But you're like, I'm feeling really good. This is normal for you, right?
And so, we started learning about these stress compensation mechanisms that many of us developed, and why it was causing so many problems for operators getting out, because the things that you used to do to let off the gas pedal to go and do things were no longer there. And it affected us in ways that probably with some of these athletes coming off their career is maybe you start getting a little bit of a belly, estrogen, maybe cortisol levels are high, but yet now there's no mechanism that's offsetting these things,
right,
primarily due to physical activity. And you start to pay the price, and you don't really know why. And so the answer tends to be go do more of that shit. Well, guess what? You're in your 40s,
right,
got a couple of bullet holes in you, you're all jacked up. You cannot, it's non-sustainable.
right.
So that's where the whole advent of, learning more about obviously meditation, breath work, all the vagal work that we do,
Yeah.
those things. And I will tell you, my system was hit pretty hard. And this is something I'm still working on to this very day. And after being hospitalized recently and being able to see some things happen where I didn't have my full prefrontal cortex faculties, I could see where some of that stuff was erupting. So still working on it. It's ingrained. It's pretty hard in my physiology. I know what to do. I know what moves the needle. And I think I told you, if I can move the needle with certain techniques like breath work or electrostim, that's okay. Just like I can take certain peptides and get good benefits. Maybe it gives me 5% here, 10% there. But as I found out, in your pillars, as we talk about the pillars, that's really where the money's made. Rather than trying to default and go to all these techniques, you got to get the pillars down pat. Got to. And that's why, I know it's with you. When I'm coaching people, those are non-negotiables. You want to talk to me about peptides, performance-enhancing drugs?
Later.
We can talk, but right now you better be sleeping more than 4 hours a night.
Yeah.
And so as I realized that, really that's been my real focus. And because I know all the performance-enhancing techniques, but I realized I got to get this shit dialed in and really live by my own code.
Commitments. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's doing that. And so I think I've gone as far as I can now. This is truly like a chronic injury for me. So I believe I told you I'm going to go do the stellate ganglion block.
Yeah.
I've talked to enough people, seen the pros and cons. I have a feeling with me that doing that intervention to the system and then applying everything I know about increasing vagal tone and everything, it's going to probably take and catch because it requires time. It's entrainment. It's just like some of the electrostim stuff we use to do resets. You can do 1 or 2 of those and see your HRV go up and you know it's working. But it's going to be back to shit. And it takes entrainment time. So I just need that respite from my own system. So by doing that ganglion block, hopefully it'll take me in a parasympathetic long enough to do all the other stuff to actually make it stick.
Yeah, as I sit here processing all that you're saying, it just feels like this perpetual state of adrenaline. And you're like, what is that doing at the level of the cell? What is that doing at, everything? So it's driving insulin resistance. It's, there's
aging me. It's aging.
Oxidative stress.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff it's doing. And you've done such an incredible job of, 1, applying the brakes, 2, taking all the interventions, but there's still another level there for sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's more psychological work I need to get done. That's one of the things that came out of this last 4 in the hospital. I've done a lot of work. I can say I'm in a really good place, but that just helped me peek behind the curtain and see there was some, okay.
Do you know what's calling me? It's similar to you. Obviously, we've got different subset of challenges, history, but I'm in the next 5 years of my life, I'm going to double down on, not saying you need to do this, but I'll tell you my logic, double down on long duration something, cardio. I just feel like there's an opportunity that is only present in the depth that I would get in something like a 10-hour bike ride, a 10-hour hike. Like, I feel like I need to go and just be in solitude. And like the first 3 or 4 hours, that's all superficial bullshit.
Yep.
Once you start getting to 7, 8, 9 hours, you're like in solitude. Now it's like meditation, right?
Yep.
You start the first 15 minutes, it's like whatever.
Yeah.
Once you've been in it for a few hours, you're like, oh, I know what I'm processing now. Like when I did that, did you ever do BioCybernaut?
Yeah.
Yeah, similar idea, right?
Yep.
Like when you're there meditating 12 to 16 hours a day, like by the end of that 4th day, you're like, all right, I know what's going on in my head right now. I've got a pretty good handle on all of my bullshit and like releasing all that stuff. I think that not everyone's willing to do that, but certainly.
Yeah. No, it's and on that front, so there's the doing the activities, basically the ones that you're getting uncomfortable in and being comfortable in that activity. So even though it's long duration, the 10-hour bike ride, that seems long. Another point I will make is, so that helps. That's an acute help. But another one and I know it's hard for guys who've got a lot of stuff going on, is, man, the value of a 2, preferably 3-week break. Get out there. It's kind of like what Costa Rica did for me, that 1 3-week trip. It's like a week you're there, but you're still thinking, I'm going back.
Totally.
2 weeks.
Dude, I do it every year.
So then by week 3, it's like,
it's gone.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in this, and that's where the money is made.
Yep.
In terms of
breaking habits.
Yeah. So it's huge, and then you have those pieces like you mentioned, those particular event-specific type things that primarily help you deal with being uncomfortable. Gets the body back to a point where this is not a threat.
It's not even the uncomfortable. It's the time. Like I was like, what am I going to do for 10 hours? Where it doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be like you're forced to sit. Because, if you start meditating for 10 hours, you're not going to do it. You're going to get up and you're like, I got to scratch my nose.
Especially if your environment doesn't support it.
So if I go ride a bike somewhere where I'm like, hey, you got to ride back. There's no other way to get back. Or you're off the top of a mountain. You're like, well, you got to get back down. I think those are the moments that I crave right now to truly explore the depths or the perimeters of myself.
Yeah, and it's good that you can do that voluntarily, because everything you just explained is what I've just involuntarily gone through.
3 weeks
immobilized.
in the
I know,
yeah.
just immobilized and dealing with time and nothing else to do except for the occasional the visitors who are there talking to me. But no, man, there was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And actually, I talked with Karen, quite a bit about all the work that was getting done during that time period, and allowing me to refine my process going forward.
One of the skills you've acquired through your life is understanding how to operationalize ultimately everything. So you're looking at your current life. You've gone through a number of things in your past. You've had these stresses, these traumas, these physical burdens, and now you're like, all right, I'm reversing my psychology around it, 2, reversing my physiology around it. And you've really, and with we have 3 master's degrees, like with the education you've got, you're looking deep into how to heal the system, how to rewind the age, the years. So one of the things that you and I bond over is like operationalizing wellness, operationalizing performance, operationalizing longevity, even though that word is abused. One of the most interesting things that the audience will garner from you is how you think about your current day-to-day processes around living the next 30 to 50 years healthy, strong, vibrant, capable. Yeah. I'd love to hear what's going on in your mind now, coming off this accident and going, hey, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm still stronger than I am now, faster than I am now, more capable than I am now 20 years from now? Yeah.
So, man, that's like one of the things that's at the forefront of my mind, more so than anything else.
I know.
So, and then after coming off this one, the beauty of it was it basically verified everything I either planned on, researched, or was an advocate of before. All these things I said, wow, I'm in here, and by the way, by everybody's measure, the doctors, other guys who've had this injury, I am doing freaking spectacular. Right. What a lot of you don't know is I came in here, I'm wearing a neck brace. I was supposed to have it on for 3 months. I've had it for 6 weeks. And literally, I'm doing great. There was paralysis. My fingers, arms are moving again, getting better. But it was all due to those process pieces prior to that.
Man,
that's
if I could just share, I'm sure you remember the conversations we had when you're laying there, and I'm just like, you're like, it's broken. I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? Do this, do this, do this. And you're like, and it was just so operational. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the pilot said something about that too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know it, but so they didn't have my identification. And did you hear what they were calling me at the hospital?
Yeah.
I came in on the flight. I have no identification. No one's with me. So usually it's a John Doe. In my case, it said General Doe. So I guess I was telling people what to do, even though I'm delirious and injured. But no, that's kind of a habit. That's what comes out. And you know what? That's great, because you've heard the saying, we don't, in the crisis situation, it's not like we default to the actions that we would desire, but we default to the level of our training. Yep. And I think that's what was occurring there.
Yeah. I learned so much in that moment, man, to just your calmness kept me calm, and obviously I was going to be calm no matter what, but it was like rehearsed. It was like,
Yeah.
do this, do this, do this. Like, we'd practiced that before. I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like I've been here before.
Yeah.
I got you. Whatever you need, let's go.
My son noted that too.
Yeah.
You know, and part of it was also to keep him calm. The
course.
last thing you want to do is have others in distress.
Yeah.
And so, we talked about it later.
You're just like,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah. I told him he could be like that too. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's great when that was a sucky example to have to emulate.
Yes.
But, you know, whenever you get a chance with your kids, that's what you do. You probably heard, like, when you have a toddler running and they bawl and skin their knee, it's not like, oh, my God. No, you're calm. You're in there. It's like, hey, no big deal. You know, you treat it for what it is.
Yep.
And, I remember, just a little aside here, but I remember being in our neighborhood, and this Cliff was about 6 years old. He was with a bigger kid, and the kid kind of slammed him into the asphalt. So mouth exceedingly bloody. A woman comes up holding him, screaming. Karen's freaking out, and I'm like, I literally grabbed him and said, get out of here. And I calm him, like, hey, buddy. And immediate calm voice, taking it down.
They feel your heart rate. They feel your energy.
Exactly. You know, then also what that did is the other adults, it helped
Of course.
them. But there's no cost to that. What they don't realize is all that stuff is kind of trained. People think they need to emote and do those things. No, man, you're not hurt.
Right.
Assess. You know, be calm. It doesn't matter on the inside. You're thinking, oh my God, my kid. You know, no, you just, it's alien to me.
Yeah.
So because it's ingrained, but yeah, whenever I can teach that, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. So what are you operationalizing now, knowing this next 20 years of your life is strong, vibrant, athletic? You know, my mission as a man, I think I may have shared with you, is like, I want to be an athlete when I'm 80. So you've got 20 plus years now. You're like, how are you operationalizing being an athlete when I'm 80?
Yeah. So, I know that's going to go by like that.
So fast.
It is. So first of all, back to the concept for the general physical preparedness and playing with that some, you know, basically using periodization to figure out what I want it to look like, how much muscle.
Yeah.
You know,
So do you have specific things in mind?
I do. I have them written down. For example, I do not want to exceed 175 pounds in weight. And there's especially at this age, thing of wear and tear on the joints at this age. What I knew I was capable of strength-wise before at an even lesser weight, even though it's going to be different because I am older. One of the great things about getting older is, while, yes, a lot of capacities decline, but strength is one that you can really do a good job at maintaining if you work at it.
Yep.
There are a lot of old, strong dudes out there. So strength is a big one for me, and fortunately that also coincides with better longevity statistics. Yep. So there's that, and I will probably I got to figure out what standard I'm going to use to determine that, because right now I'm kind of still stuck on my standards I used for the 20s, you know, like bench press, you know, 2.5 body weight squat. You know, there's some basic measurements in there for strength. And then there'll be others that will literally just relate to more of the obstacle course racing type things. You know, can I go across the balance beam, you know, running, things of that nature. I got a whole litany of basically those mission essential task lists trying to hit, and I'm gonna have to be realistic about deciding what my minimum standards are going to be with that. Yeah.
So I look to you as someone always being on the cutting edge of longevity, of performance, of wellness, well-being. And I think you and I have done a pretty cool job over the last 8 years of like bouncing ideas past each other, seeing what's working, seeing what's not working. And you're always my source of critical thinking, of reason, of like, think about that, not about that, focus on this, not on this. So coming back to this idea of like, what are you operationalizing now, going into the next 20 years of your life to ensure that you show up for your 80th birthday as much of a badass as you are on your 40th, 50th, and 60th?
Okay. Like I said earlier, a lot of the things I was doing before, and, you know, we've shared protocols before, much like the cardiac one we shared, and then we've shared others that are more on the GPP lines of things. To me, all that's still valid. Now I just got to figure out what are the metrics. So all the techniques, everything still applies. Just like we were just talking earlier about bodybuilding, still applies to the longevity space, but you're not doing exactly for the original reasons or intent. So what do I extract from that and use? So pretty much everything from before still applies. And by everything, I'm not just talking about the physical fitness component. I'm talking about the work we've done with peptides, with hormones, with some of the newer stuff, the stem cells, the young plasma. All those are figuring in now. And much like that mission essential task list, what I'm trying to figure out is, as that schedule is there of things to do, basically what's the minimum effective dose? How often do I need to touch this a year in order for it to get me where I'm going? I don't want to be wasteful, not to mention some of this stuff can be quite costly.
Yeah, of course.
So it's always about the most bang for the buck with me as far as what I'm doing. And with that, it all circles back to the lifestyle pillars. It always circles back to that. So the way I'm actually writing all this up right now is I'm writing everything up. I'm learning a lot from this healing process. The fact that I've come as far as I have since the accident on, the work I'm doing with the nerves and the spine and what's going on, it's just, once again, validation of all the things we've talked about working. And talking to people, by the way, who did not do it. So I'm in touch with other guys with spinal cord injuries who said they had heard some of these same things about improving, and they, in some cases, just thought it was bullshit and didn't do it. A very good friend of mine now, he is not a dissimilar injury, is still in a wheelchair. And he told me, he goes, Curt, I thought it was all bullshit. And he was doing this as a warning story for me because he heard what I was going through.
Bullshit?
Trying to do HBOT, stem cells. He says, now he recommended me, he goes, even if it has a 0.01% of promise, do it. Throw everything at it. Because he was told that after 18 months by his neurosurgeon that any healing that was going to be done was going to be complete. And he said that's what he found to be true. He was doing better through certain periods of time, but he was doing none of this stuff. And at 18 months, that was it. What he had was what he had. And so I'm already here at this point in time doing very well. My goal is obviously to get full functionality and strength back to the arms and upper body, and that's it.
It's just, it's your mission. You just make it the mission. You're like, fuck, there's no question I'm going to do it. I'm just going to make it the mission. You got it, man.
Yeah.
Like, I always say, people ask about you. I was like, I would take your advice over any doctor I've ever met. And so if you take that on yourself and be like, man, I got this, you will. Just like make that the expectation, not the outlier.
Yeah. It was definitely, from a mindset issue. It was pretty weird because when it first happened, I was like in worst case mode because the legs, nothing. I'm like, okay, worst case mode, and then just things really started rolling and accelerating. And so for myself, just so I could keep my own expectation, I was always in the mindset, at least there for the initial period, it was going to suck and I was going to be without arms or something along those lines. And then things just kept getting better and better doing some expectation management internally. And I'll tell you, a challenge with this was with the kids. After this happened, they find out Cliff was there, but the others find out I'm in the hospital. And a Special Forces buddy of mine was talking to the kids, and he goes, so, how are you doing? What do you think about your dad? And they're like, oh, he's and they're so used to, with my history as well from things that have happened with me in the past, is they're so used to Dad just like coming through unscathed, bouncing back. And in a way, I didn't like that because it's not always going to be the case. I could get in a car accident, die from cancer, whatever. And I think they've come to this. It's nice to have your kids think you're invincible.
Yep. But
I'm not. And so I try to find ways to teach them lessons that,
Hold on a minute. What do you mean you're not? What the fuck are you talking about, man?
Yeah, well, so far it's okay. But no, but really it's just that I realize that they've been brought up in that environment, and I'm really trying to find ways to, the deal. It's always making people okay with whatever happens.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, man, that's one of the challenges, off topic, that I have as a dad, is like, one day I'm going to go. And I talk to them all the time about, someday I'm going to go too, and you guys are going to be okay. I want you to celebrate. I want you to be happy. I want you to, if I've brought anything great to your life, smile about it. Don't get sad about it, So you're sort of almost like preparing them now. Like, that's got to be the hardest part of dying. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'll die at some point. But if it hurts anybody else, then that's the hard part. Yeah. I literally want to try to extrapolate some operationalization of this. Okay. So what are you going to be doing cardio-wise? What are you going to be doing? Okay. One of the most interesting things that you need to talk about is your brain optimization protocols. What are you going to be doing to optimize? So the healing you sort of touched on. Is there anything specific that you're like, hey, this has really worked? Let's start there. Yeah. You're 6 weeks after, broken in 3 spots, your neck?
Well, yeah, it's 3 they did surgery on, but actually there's more. They just left the atlas because you know where it's at, and so I got 2 fractures in the atlas, and it's just sitting
They
there.
left it. Yeah, I think you mentioned that.
Yeah.
So you're in the hospital for 2 weeks, immobile. They let you out in rehab, and you start to regain some movement. Now you're 6 weeks back, and obviously you're still wearing a neck brace, but like you look like you're well on your way.
Yeah.
So
Except 30 pounds lighter with no muscle. Pissed off about that.
you'll get there, man. You know what to do.
No, it's just interesting.
Yeah. So what has worked? What has been the mindset? What has surprised you?
What surprised me is the progress. You know, you're doing the right things. You believe, you trust the science, but it's just like when you're working with a client, when they're actually doing what you're suggesting, they're sticking to plan, the progress. That's one of the great things about it. There's some pieces where everything's a learning point. Whenever you get a different injury or something even happens in life, there's always some learning to be extracted. For me, is a significantly more level of empathy and understanding of what people who are paralyzed are dealing with, even though mine was short-lived and now it's only this weird partially. And the fact, if you're familiar with people who say they have nerve pain, it is a completely different flavor of pain. It is, it's really strange. And so there's a better understanding of that now, which I think will then make me even more capable when I'm helping, an even more diverse set of people. So that's been rather incredible. And then the other aspect, buddy, with that pillar called sleep. So you probably remember early on, I was not. So there was
2 weeks or something you didn't sleep.
Yeah. I mean, the Oura ring stopped working. That period in the ICU, I got no sleep. It was becoming a real problem, hallucinating, all that good jazz. And the logical part of my mind is thinking about the healing process. I'm thinking, okay, we're doing all this stuff. We're getting perfusion around the wound. We're doing all the things we need to do for it to heal. I'm not fucking sleeping. This is not serving the healing process. So attacking that problem was like my number one priority. I mean, not many people probably would realize it. Karen knew it because it was making me miserable as well, but was attacking this and trying multiple things, to include drugs, to help with it. And right now that I'm sleeping great, I told you the other day, just after the stem cells, slept for 10 hours. I just knew I savored the recovery. When I got up, I was just subjectively and objectively, I knew what was going on. So sleep was a huge point. So we're good in that category right now. Sleep is resuming. And then, of course, anything I can do in movement and to help with the innervation process of the nerves that are still injured and in shock and trying to reestablish themselves. It's an interesting process.
How bad's the pain now?
Right now, it's like so you're familiar with electrostim, how you can do it, and it has like this. So that right now, from my delts all the way down to my fingers, that's what I feel like right now.
It's constant.
It's constant. And then, you can touch it and it might get worse sometimes. There's a numbness in the hands, but not to where I don't have sensation. And then on this one, this finger and thumb are basically
nothing there.
Yeah, there's no sensation. There's only the pressure. It's like the old thing, if I put this one on the hot oven, it'd be immediate. This one, I might only feel the pressure and screw it up.
Man.
Yeah. And that's a T1, T2 issue. Actually, at the doc this morning, we were looking at the scans and going over things. So,
did they do recent scans?
Yeah, just did it.
How's it looking?
Broke.
Yeah.
But
is it healing?
No, he says I'm doing it. This is one of the weird things is to hear doctors say, I expect a full recovery. Because usually everybody's non-committal. They're like, well, it looks good, but you never know. You got to wait and see.
They're trying to hedge
so
their bets.
I had a guy in the rehabilitation hospital. As a matter of fact, I think he ticked off the regular. He was there. He was doing the rounds with the regular set of doctors. They're looking at hiring him. Evidently, he's this pretty well-known rehab guy out of USF, and he's over there with me, and he's talking to me, and he goes, "So how long has it been since the accident?" Because he was evaluating how I was moving. And at that point, it had been like 8 days. And I'm like, it's been about 8 days. And he goes, no, I mean since the accident, since whatever got you in this condition, not since you've been here. I'm like, 8 days. He goes, I'm working with guys, it's more like 6 to 8 months, and they're just getting to where you're at. He goes, 8 days, you're recovering fully. And the other doc looked like, don't tell him that, but he did. And then yesterday as well, he's like, I expect a full recovery. Seeing what he saw, with the scans and doing his evaluation and the level. But, that's great that they're saying that, and that's what I'm working towards. But at the end of the day, you typically don't know until maybe 6 months out, a year out. And the neurosurgeon, that's the way they work. They're like, 6 months is when we'll probably know, but we're not going to officially say anything until a year out. But just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Have you started on any mobility work, any strength work?
Yes. And most of that's actually been in physical therapy. So I'm using, the electrostim device in conjunction with doing that because
Did you seek out a place that is the new fit?
Yeah. So, that's the one I'm using right now with those guys. And the practitioner I'm working with, I don't know if you remember Stephanie. She was a doctor of physical therapy. Very
She train here?
She may have worked
for CEP.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you would know. So anyway, specifically sought her out because highly competent with that, has seen so many different things, and man, she brings a lot of tools to the table. She's also using another device, what they call the windback. Are you familiar with that? It uses radio frequency. So a lot of people use ultrasound to generate the heat, but that can cause problems, certain side effects you wouldn't want. Whereas this, using the RF energy, it can precisely go in and determine where to heat up the muscle and basically just runs it over all these areas. And, you feel like you're warming up.
Right.
It's warming up the area.
Vascularization.
Exactly. And, obviously after doing the plasma treatments and the stem cells, I did it right after the stem cells went in. And,
perfect.
Yeah, just getting that stuff flowing in. And then after that, that's when I slept for 10 hours. So anyway, using those techniques. But what she does is, I'm not sure if you ever used it when you have the gloves on.
Yep.
So in order to get the most distal effect of the electricity of what they're doing there, we're wearing the gloves no matter what I'm doing. So I'm getting charge going through. And, simple curls, a lot of work, but it's not only for the strength, which at this point is minimal, it's range of motion, making those nerves and everything work through the range of motion so I don't end up being a guy who can only lift his arm, so high, because that would happen if I just let things go the way they would go, because I wouldn't be able to do it without that push with that going on.
Have you done blood work yet?
No, because since I did just recently do the plasma and the stem cells, I need to give them time to get set. So maybe 2 more weeks is when I'll get another piece. You don't want to get it right away because it will be skewed. I mean, it look like a 20-year-old or something in there. Yeah.
There'll be something certainly skewed with liver stuff and something will be off.
Yeah, so I'll reckon about 2 more weeks. I'll go back and look at all my notes, but I'm looking forward to that because I have a feeling it's going to be really good, dude. Really good.
So you've, since retiring from the military, since you and I know each other, you coach really high-level execs, entrepreneurs, people looking to, one, keep themselves safe, two, think critically, right? You have some terms that I think are valuable for the audience to understand around, like, critically analyzing the events of modern day.
Yeah.
So for the audience, like, Curt is the first person I call when I'm trying to vet information. Like, hey, what's going on? And what we didn't really lean in on is Curt also worked in the CIA. You also worked in the FBI for a little bit.
And the DIA.
And the DIA. And within that experience, at least what you've shared with me is like, there's a lot of deep level critical thinking that's required to understand the actual source of this information. Right. Like what's manipulation, what's authentic, what's actually true here. Yeah. And so when there's something to be vetted, whether that be politics, whether that be economics, whether that be, war, whether that be the media, you've taught me the concept, among many, of find the source of the information. What's the source? Yeah. Is someone, and who has an agenda along the journey of this information? Because it's seldom you're getting the source of the information. You're getting someone's manipulated version of the situation. Yeah. So I'd love to have you share sort of what that experience was in your life and how you've taken your ability to look at something and actually understand the root of it. You've seen behind the curtain. You've seen under the Komodo. And so you know what's actually happening, but most people out there simply don't. Right. Most people are not only that they don't know what's going on, they're so unbelievably far from reality, but they're so convicted by their reality. They're just like, fuck, let it go, man. Yeah. Like, let your shit go. So many people are so many steps removed from what actually is reality, but They're just like bought in.
Yeah, they're fans, because fan is short for fanatic.
Yeah.
You're a fan of a team, whatever, but that's literally what you're seeing in you're familiar with sunk cost fallacy. And then once they've just gone down that road, that's their team. They're so vested.
Right. Even
in the sight of irrefutable truth to the contrary of what they believe, they just keep going down that path. It's as if they
but it's not it's the thing is it's seldom irrefutable, right? Because they can always push back. Well, what about this? And you're like,
like the flat earthers.
Yeah,
literally. I mean,
you can find bullshit to substantiate your own beliefs, and that's so hard to navigate. So any piece of advice, any stories you want to like offer these people, any pieces of wisdom to be like, hey, I don't know, learn to think critically.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to say learn to think critically because there is a process to that. I mean, even in coaching, it takes me a while to get there with people, at least those who want to go that route, because it's better to do that actually in a more formal process, like steering them towards a course, literally online, whatever, on critical thought, on these particular steps. We actually did that in the government. You would actually go through training of doing competing hypothesis. You would use all these different techniques to ensure that you weren't using your own biases to come to the conclusion. And you're always going to have your own biases. There's no such thing as an actual Mr. Spock, okay? But as much as that was kind of my ideal in doing that, always realizing I had a bias to something, for the regular person out there, the biggest problem is the way they're consuming their information, whether it's on the internet media or the old traditional news, CBS, CNN, all those guys, is the fact that they are getting, as you said, someone else's interpretation, and that interpretation is usually going to be skewed, not usually, it's always skewed by a particular agenda in play. When I teach people, and I also with a lot of my friends, who come to us, like, because they'll send me something and I'll take a look at it if it's not too Looney Tunes to be dismissed. And I tell them about getting primary source information. First of all, just the fact that you received it from this television station, that's already once removed. You received it from where did they get it? Now, when I start talking about that, people they glaze over because that's some work they got to do. So is this important enough for you to know anything about it for real or not?
Everyone wants 7-second sound bites.
Yeah. So if I'm actually spending time with that person coaching, I give them homework. I give them some easier ones. Okay, this happened. And I'll pick something that maybe happened a year or two ago. So it's still recent enough to be somewhat pertinent, but that now because it might have been highly contentious at the time it came out, and now what we know about it, what's come out, and of course, no one's talking about it because it's old news, but also because it doesn't fit the agenda. A good case in point that I used for a short term was there was this group of high school students from a Catholic high school in Hawaii who went to Washington, D.C., and there were a bunch of different protests going around, and there was this Native American Indian guy who was out there protesting, and the way they skewed it was that this young high schooler was in his face, basically being racial, being disrespectful, and that's the video you get, all right? And, these days, things go online, they go viral. It's basically, crushing this kid's reputation. And I remember a lot of people, whether it was in social media or whatever, they're immediately just going at him. And so the friends or whoever I might be coaching, I'm like, okay, look at this particular thing and then just forget about it. Let's revisit it a year from now. I'll do things like that. And of course, that kid's 200 million richer right now because he filed a suit against CNN and some of the other stations for skewing it, because the whole video was available. And once you look at everything, which in a court of law, that's a good place to start, is when you have something that's actually made it to court, what came out of it, and especially if the evidence was so obvious like that. And it was obvious he was completely set up. It was completely skewed horribly. Now, some of the damage to him had been done, which is why he received over $200 million. But all the people who felt vindicated, saying he was a piece of crap, his parents raised him wrong, he was a racist, here we are. They don't, in their minds, that's all still real.
Totally.
But they didn't know it. So I show them, if there's ever something that's really a listing of emotional responsibility, but it's not really important to your life, as an experiment, just take it. I got a little folder of these things I keep for reference to teach people and say, look, everybody was hot on this. Now what's happened? A lot of it's not even
like the
important.
whole COVID situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Still such a hot thing, but it seems like it's really coming out now.
Well, what's really cool, I don't know if you saw this, but even on the actual government website.
I did see that.
So it's like, sorry, people want to pick and choose once again because they're fans. Well, I don't trust that, but yet they believed everything on that site.
Right.
For a certain period of time. And you got.
So can you trust the government website? There's another question. Like someone's the guys.
Trust is yeah. See it's just another source, but once again, primary source. You dig to the level that you can, and then you just got to start trusting whatever your level, or perhaps your trusted expert who's also looking at it is giving you. Because this is what gets into that part about being comfortable with uncertainty. It's going to exist everywhere, but with a lot of these things, because you can start getting the agenda piece also teased out of it, you start realizing, even though I don't know for certain this, I do know that the way it was used was to meet an agenda.
Whose agenda?
Exactly. Whose agenda? It depends on the situation.
Yeah.
I would recommend if people want to learn about agendas, while he's kind of gotten in the media spotlight of late, and you always have to watch that with people once they get discovered. But a guy by the name of Mike Benz, who he talks a lot about what's called the blob, which was a term coined by Barack Obama, but it's about this amorphous entity of various institutions that seem to really control everything. Because he, as president, was trying to get some things done, but he couldn't get them through. And he goes, this blob that's out there that's really running things. And that's actually true. And Mike Benz really gets into some good educational work on learning about these various institutions that are vested in keeping us at war, vested in all these things that, as a sovereign nation.
He has a podcast, right?
He's got an active Twitter account. I don't think he's a guest on many podcasts. He's even been on Rogan, I think, the past few months. But I remember him from way back before anybody knew about him, because, from my own experience of actually being in the government, I knew he was on the right track with a lot of things. So that's the guy I would recommend people, without me having to, I'm not going to talk about classified stuff, but he was uncovering quite a bit about these institutions that, was one spot on.
Sourcing good information, vetting your source.
Vetting is huge.
Man,
That's a lot of what I, even, I forget the government. Like we know people who want to go do psychedelic retreats and all that good stuff. I even vet a lot of that, because there are a lot of knuckleheads in that space.
So many.
Shamans, all that. So vetting. So vetting can apply across the board. Vetting instructors for training them on, how we've talked about doing some shooting stuff, so, I would never send you to anybody who's just a knucklehead. You're going to get somebody who's highly competent.
So much we can talk about, buddy. And you're currently taking on a small number of clients that you help optimize a lot of different aspects of their life. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that, like how you work with people specifically.
And what's interesting is I call my work domain agnostic. In other words, and this is really strange because I didn't think it was, I was very hesitant, because I'd have guys, like you're talking about entrepreneurs and stuff, and far more successful than I could ever imagine being in business. New things, the nuances, the how-tos, I never had any idea of. Yet I have those guys, have quite a few MDs, doctors, guys are more in the physical fitness space, the health and nutrition space, the longevity space, but yet I've coached them all. And what I found is, because of these processes you talk about, it's not what to think, it's how to think. And so being able to inculcate that in them, with a lot of them, it goes back to what we were just talking about. It's getting their freaking fire that's going on in the back of their head because they're worried about some insane market situation or this, that, because they've been watching the news. Mm-hmm. So for some of them, that's just been, I've relieved that little stress level.
Yeah, they're losing focus on what's important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's not only losing focus on what's important, but focusing on what's completely unimportant.
Yeah.
Completely.
The thing that we spoke about before we started recording that you do unbelievably well is sort of looking at all of the information, all the inputs, so to speak, and sifting through it without worry about someone's feelings. You're so objective with like, hey, it's this, get rid of that, focus on that. You're like, oh, fuck. Like, how come I couldn't see that? I could have spent the next 5 years trying to figure that out. You're just like, that, gone, this. You're like, oh. And that's just, I always say, like, honest, right? You're the honest, you're the mirror.
Broker.
Yeah, you're like, okay. and which is unbelievably important. So you're working with a lot of guys to help them keep their life safe, optimize their businesses, optimize their bodies. So many incredible things that you've done for me as a friend, and I'm grateful for you, man. Can appreciate you being here. Hopefully we had a good time. I was worth your time.
It was great.
Definitely plan to do it again.
Yeah, and in the interim, we'll do some muscle building.
Let's do it.
Thanks, brother.